Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I know it can be a little tough shaking off the long weekend and coming back in to hit the week as we are going. I know we have a shorter week this week, but appreciate you being here. Appreciate you taking the time. Also, hey, Stevie, great to see you as well. I hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend, Memorial Day in general. I feel like generally it's a good time to be able to reset as we head into summer. Although I will say probably stressful for some people who were not staying at home. I know we were talking about on Friday how much travel is going on, but I just seen a tweet from the Morning Brew talking about some data that they'd seen from the TSA. I think they were saying 5 out of the top 10 busiest days, travel days ever in their history have taken place in the last 2 weeks. So I feel like a ton of people have been traveling, have been dealing with a lot of the hassle of traveling sometimes, but hopefully they are going somewhere fun where they can relax, or a hotel, wherever they're staying, and not dealing with any delays, cancellations, all of the headaches of travel. Speaking of which, as Stevie is mentioning as well, Dan is actually traveling himself today. So more traveling continuing on. So today I thought we would kind of keep it on the Texas and cannabis theme, and pull a interview we did a little while back with Austin, who is the founder of the Texas Cannabis Collective. You may have seen him on X and Twitter. We had sat down over the last weekend and kind of talked through what's going on, in Texas in general, what the changes legislatively mean to the work that they're doing, what is the work that they're doing, kind of all of those different things. So I think now's probably a pretty good time to share that conversation. So we'll share it in full. You might have seen a clip or two floating around on X, but I figured it's time to show us the whole thing. That is true. Yes, Texas and cannabis. That's the key. All right, so I'm going to pull that up. And then, of course, if you guys have any questions, I will pop in at the end to say a little hey and then probably bye as well. But yeah, stay tuned. So I will pull that up right now. Here we go. There we go. Here we go. Going. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special Alpha Nooner. We have a weekend Alpha Nooner. We are very excited to welcome Austin Zamhariri, who is the executive director of the Texas Cannabis Collective. We're very excited to sit down and talk a little bit about what they are working on, as well as a little bit of insight into the Texas market as a whole from a cannabis perspective. All that to say, Austin, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful day here in Fort Worth, Texas. And I just really enjoy the opportunity to be with y'all and to talk about, my favorite subject, which is cannabis.
It's important work, and it definitely shows because we're coming in on a Saturday to get it done. So I really, really appreciate it as well. So I feel like the best place that I want to start is probably just an introduction to you, just getting a sense of why this is so important to you, how you got into sort of the cannabis scene. What's your background and story to kind of share with everyone?
Sure. So I grew up I was a 90s kid. So I graduated high school in 2001. And I had never, I was a pretty straight ace kid, grew up in the DARE program, understood that, drugs are bad for you. And smoking marijuana was a bad thing and all of that kind of stuff. Until I went to college and discovered cannabis for the first time. And it was really just kind of mind shattering. Oh, this is nothing like they said. And this is, mind you, 25 years ago almost. So it was real. I started, I fell in love. I was never really a drinker through college. I fell in love with cannabis. And man, I really went through a lot of rabbit holes of research, and I'll never forget, I was telling people, man, this could help with cancer, this could help with multiple sclerosis, like this can help with autism, all of these, like, I started learning about things like systems in your body, the endogenous cannabinoid system, started learning about all kinds of history about the plant and prohibition and all of that kind of stuff. And people were just, oh, you're crazy. You smoke too much marijuana and you just dumb kid. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And so, I use cannabis, help people get obtain cannabis.
Yeah.
Call it what you will. And then in 2010, in Grapevine, Texas, I was arrested for misdemeanor marijuana possession, which is Class B misdemeanor here in the state of Texas, for possession under 2 ounces. They found like a little bit of under a gram or something like that, some ridiculous small number of what would actually be considered probably CBD flower
Sure.
right now.
Yeah.
Is something absolutely ridiculous. That was kind of my foray with cannabis into the criminal justice system, especially here in Texas. And for people who don't know, the modern day marijuana enforcement, what we've known for the last 50, 55 years, a lot of that was, should we say, the genesis of that enforcement was in 1915 and beyond in the state of Texas, where El Paso was the first city in the state of in the entire country to outlaw marijuana, and a lot of the criminalization of it sprang in places like Texas border states, because this is where a lot of mass Mexican migration was happening.
That's sort of where the term with marijuana versus cannabis, where marijuana is supposed to sound scary or sound right. That was sort of part of the.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, marijuana as a term had existed long before
Sure.
that, but it certainly was utilized in a nefarious way to. You're right. Scare, the population of that time,
Sure.
associating it with jazz singers and
Sure.
all of this kind of the racial background. We don't really have to dive too deep into the history behind it, but the enforcement of it, that has existed in Texas for about 100 years. And I constantly tell people that, like, what we're battling, the culture that we're trying to change, the prohibition history that has existed here that we're trying to dismantle, it is unlike any other battle that has gone on across the country, whether it's in California or Massachusetts, or I mean, you name it. We just simply, there's a different. It's the belly of the beast, if you will, of prohibition.
Yeah. I would love to get into that a little bit, because we talk about this on the Alpha Nooner every so often. We talk about all the states, what's going on, what's developing. We always talk about Texas a little bit, but it's surprising to me because culturally, Texas to me strikes me as very, we'll do what we want, and the law shouldn't really, put its nose in our business if we're not hurting anyone, and sort of that stuff. And I know, like you're saying, sort of the dare propaganda and all of sort of the misinformation, I think, around how dangerous it can actually be. Kind of like the classification, the scheduling, where it seems like it's dangerous as heroin or things like that, when I don't think that that's proven to be the case. Why is tech? Is it just that pass that you're kind of describing? Is that still really affecting it? Is it something else? It's always shocking to me.
Yeah, it's it is. There are consequences to 100 years of disinformation, propaganda, outright racism,
Sure.
all of these dynamics. And so again, it's just, this is the way of the way our government is structured is also a lot different than a lot of other state governments that have been able to usually do this through a statewide ballot initiative. We don't have that here in the state of Texas. We can't just go out like Florida's doing right now, where they gathered X amount of signatures and are able to get it on the ballot, and if they have the entire state vote on it. We simply don't have that opportunity statewide. And also, that another thing that kind of holds us at a disadvantage is our state legislature meets once every 2 years, as opposed to every year trying to get something done. So you imagine state of Texas, as big as it is, trying to fit all of the issues of an entire state, one of the biggest states in the union,
Sure.
in about 140 days, which about five and a half months every 2 years. So and then on top of that, we're probably one of the most biggest conservative state in the country. So we have a lot of obstacles to overcome in the state, but
I think that's true, but I do think that cannabis is something that could be embraced from a conservative perspective, because I do think it is one of those things where it creates jobs, which is a very sort of conservative
Absolutely.
Republican in American jobs. I know that's like a big thing as well. I feel like it's one of those things where you don't want an illicit market running, which we'll talk a little bit about going forward. Why does that not connect? Is there a way to kind of make that case to people, or is that not really necessary to kind of get things
Oh, I
progressed?
think you'd be incredibly shocked at how embraced it is by conservatives.
Okay.
It was the hemp bill that passed in 2019 here in the state of Texas on the heels of the 2018 Farm Bill was completely supported by the Republican Party in the state, who really dictates a lot of our laws. So, it's cannabis is very embraced by the conservative uh, majority here in Texas, and that couldn't be more evident than the border of Texas, in El Paso, in Lubbock, Amarillo, all of these West Texas towns that are connected to New Mexico. The data is showing that places like Sunland Park, which is like 18,000, 20,000 people, is you know, doing second highest revenue sales in,
Mm.
recreational marijuana in the state of New Mexico. Well, why is that? Because everybody from Texas is coming there. Not to say that there's not a lot of those people are also liberal, but I'm telling you, the Republicans, the conservatives, they definitely partake in cannabis. They have, but I think it really is just kind of like a social dynamic. There's still a lot of people from that persuasion that I think are a little closeted on this issue, just because of kind of how polarizing it is from a national standpoint. Um, but that's, really just to kind of transition into it. That's kind of why we created this organization, is to tackle the entire state and show the entire state how popular this issue is. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman,
Younger.
from 18 and 21
Mhm.
to 75,
Yep.
what your demographic is. I mean, it's pretty much accepted, and every single day we're getting more and more people that are embracing this, and
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's
I was going to say, let's back up a little bit and actually kind of get into the history and background of the Texas Cannabis Collective. Because I'd love to
sure.
hear kind of in very clear terms, what you guys are doing, what
Sure.
the aims are, all of that. And then we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. I in 2016, 2015, 2016,
Mhm.
in that time we visited Colorado, and at that time Colorado's recreational marijuana market had really started to come in full effect, and was really a thing. You were starting to see dispensers, not just centralized in Denver, but all across the state. So because of my background in
Mhm.
cannabis, my history, I wanted to check this out and see, well, man, this is too good to be true. Let's check this out. I'm a Texas boy.
Sure.
Um, so we went to Colorado, and man, whether we were in Pueblo, Denver, wherever we went, I just fell in love with this. I was like, man, this is as a 30-year-old,
Of course.
I was working in service industry as a bartender. I fell in love. I was like, oh man, I could do this. I could literally transition into being a bud tender and just sell weed all day. Like that's my dream.
Yeah.
I
Did you
could,
ever
I could
consider moving to be like, up and move over to Colorado at all ever when you were kind of seeing it?
so that was the issue,
Uh,
is I couldn't just uproot my family and move to Colorado.
that's true.
So the light
Yeah.
bulb that went off in my head was, man, well, how hard is it to legalize in Texas? We just them to legalize it in Colorado. Like, how
Bring it
hard is it
here.
to do in Texas,
Yeah.
right? Very hard. Like,
No.
man, when I
Sure.
really started digging in and getting involved and active as a reformer and as a young activist,
Mhm.
it was very apparent after my first full legislative session how how far behind Texas really was on the issue. Whereas we're even now still here we are 8 years later from that time period after this organization is now exists. We're still trying to stop the bleeding. Like, we're still going to arrest tens of thousands of people in the state of Texas for low level marijuana possession. Right back in 2016, when you would go into an office to talk about cannabis reform, whether it was medical, whether it was, penalty reduction, whether even hemp, even if you're just talking about hemp,
Sure.
they would laugh you out of there. They like, if you brought them anything, they would just literally crumple it up in your face and throw it away and tell them to get out of out of their
Yeah.
office, right? So
Yeah.
like it's not a very friendly time 8 years ago. But I wanted, as an activist, I wanted to be in the business so bad. And so I started figuring out, okay, well, what can we do? What can I do now that can, take all of my skills of branding, marketing, um, you know, making moves, So I created this little Facebook page called the Texas Cannabis Collective, which was my adventures and adventures of some of my like colleagues as we were going through this process of trying to legalize, decriminalize, expand medical access, all of that. And it really was nothing more than just like a social media entity that, 5, 10, 25 followers turned into 1,000, then turned into a couple thousand, then turned into like 25,000, and then we started expanding into other social media markets, Twitter, Instagram. Now we've got like 14,000. Twitter, we've got several thousand. So and the popularity kept going because I made sure that we were super integrated into all the aspects of Texas cannabis when it comes to the policy side, to what was happening in the young industry at the time, which there really wasn't one. And then definitely the culture side. We definitely have a ton of. I mean, we got Willie Nelson, right? Like, there's
Yes.
tons of cannabis culture out here, whether you're on the beach or whether you're in the mountains. So like, I wanted to document all of that and help make that transition and from prohibition to legal regulated market. And so that we were getting ready to actually make it a for-profit entity to maybe make it into like a news site or something like that, because we had amassed this huge following, and it was like, okay, well, what do we do with this thing? We can't just like throw it away. And then COVID hit in 2019, and that kind of like derailed a whole lot of things for I think everybody. Like, I think everybody 4 years ago was just like, what do I do?
Yeah, it's true. Totally shook everything up. Yeah, 1,000%.
And so coming out the other side of that, going into the 21 legislative session, we were like, no, we have to, I can't turn this into a for-profit, because I'm starting to see, the hemp law had just been passed, and I was starting to see some like negative things, a lot of profiteering that I wasn't really quite comfortable with. And so I wanted to make sure that what we had created was used for good, and used to like help people and help the community. I'm a big community guy. And so we took this social media entity that had amassed so many followers, and had driven so much engagement and had a lot of influence, frankly, and turned it into a 501c4 nonprofit here in the state. Really to, again, that's really our mission, is to continue with breaking news, engage in grassroots advocacy, and provide or support premier events throughout the state. And they're all focused on, again, cannabis policy, industry, and culture here in the state of Texas.
That is what I wanted to talk about, because I feel like you have taken it offline, which is great. It's sort of that extra layer of community, really being able to connect with people in person. Can you talk us through what you've done in the past, what you've liked doing community event wise?
Oh man,
about it.
I love it. It's I went to jail for a J probably this big.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? I spent 5 days in Tarrant County, which is here in Fort Worth. And they don't just throw you, they throw you in Gym Pop. It's not like there's a special low level place where they throw you. You're in there with like other meth addicts and like people who've committed homicide, and it was rough. It was not easy. And so that really hurts me, that anybody would ever have to even go through that. And really hurts me for the people who have gotten way worse than that. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You know, when we were in DC supporting the Last Prisoner Project,
Mhm.
um, you know, talking to some of these guys who had spent years in prison, like, and just talking to them, and they was just like, man, I was like crying, like,
Yeah.
you know, because
Well done
I
story.
felt that, but only
Yeah.
like this much.
Yeah. Just a taste.
And so what I really love doing is seeing my people all across the state who love this, who find true, um, you know, true quality of life through access to this plant, who have experienced injustice because of this plant, who you know, who are helping other people, who are pioneering the farming techniques and the genetics here in this state. You know, I just love being around
Yeah.
people who are passionate about this plant, who are passionate about this issue. And so I think that's probably my favorite part of doing all this. Really to answer your question, you know, so I think my favorite event that we do a big march in Fort Worth every year. It's called the Texas MJ March and Freedom Festival, and really it's pretty much the biggest festival in Texas. We have hundreds of people that come out, and we have 30, 40 vendors, local vendors out there. You know, we rent out a big park in downtown Fort Worth, and then we have a police escort where at 4:20, everybody that's there lines up, and then we literally march all the way to the courthouse, to the Tarrant County Courthouse, and have some speeches on the courthouse steps, and then we march back. And what's so poetic for me about that event is that I get to march literally right with the police escort. Everybody's smoking. No, like I'm not.
Sure.
Yeah, everybody's smoking on streets of downtown Fort Worth with a huge police escort, and we're passing Tim Curry Correctional, which is where I spent my 5 days. Right, so it's
Yeah.
very poetic that every year I get to kind of like throw it back in their
Yeah.
face. That
Reclaim it a little bit. Yeah. But that's also
yeah,
really frustrating that it's probably a reminder that there are still people that are struggling with incarceration, kind of unfair incarceration from dealing with a drug that really isn't all that harmful. And, you know, it's horrible. But that's a fantastic movement. Does that help bring in visibility as well for
oh
people
yeah,
who are just walking around in the street? Yeah. Is there like an educational component for trying to
oh sure.
undo some of the harms of sort of the propaganda component as well?
So, first and foremost, we like to market it as a First Amendment event. And when you're on the ground, you know, we talk about our First Amendment rights. Usually in Texas, we're quick to talk about our Second Amendment.
Yes.
Um, so not a lot of people, but not a lot of people have a lot of familiarity with exercising their First Amendment rights, especially publicly.
Mhm.
And so what we do is we go to links to make sure that people can come out and protest, you know, their government's bad laws in a peaceful fashion that is well organized, structured, and sends a message overall. And we have people who we've had doctors, we've had Army veterans, we've had lawyers, we've had celebrities. I mean, you name it. Like anybody from all different walks of life, we've had come speak at the event, march with us. It gets a ton of media.
Yeah.
It's right near the election, usually every 2 years. Last year was a non-election year, so like we didn't get a ton of media.
Sure. But it's coming up this year.
This year's going to be huge, especially
Okay.
on the back end of federal rescheduling.
Yep.
It's going to be right near an election. You know, it's going to, right now, there is a lot of, you know, media attention on the marijuana issue, cannabis issue.
Mhm.
So we're anticipating this year it's going to be even bigger and better than ever.
Well, so fantastic. Sounds like a super fun event in general, and also educational, and you know, just sort of encapsulating the spirit of cannabis, which is great. But what sort of, if it is an election year, what's the path towards getting progress made in Texas? Does that happen this year? How does rescheduling come into play? Does that make it easier? I've heard some things around trigger laws and how, I don't know if that's how does Texas get to that adult use? How does it get to that full medical use
Sure.
that you're aiming for, that we're all aiming for?
Well, Texas is kind of in a weird place because we've had a medical program, Texas Compassionate Use Program in Texas since it was passed. The Compassionate Use Act was passed in 2015. So, we're coming up right up on 10 years of that legislation passing. But it's also been one of the most highly restrictive programs in the country. It's overseen by our Department of Public Safety, which is a law enforcement unit. So why a law enforcement unit is overseeing a medical marijuana program as opposed to the State Health Services or Department of Agriculture, somebody is probably better suited in their jurisdiction. That really comes down to the lawmakers wanting to continue to control, and particularly the higher ups, all the way up to Governor Abbott, who want to kind of have it more tightly controlled. They still, want to treat cannabis like it's radioactive material, like plutonium, and it's, it's kind of old school. But we've had a medical program, and it's made some movement. We've actually got several thousand patients in the program, but it's just not enough. There's no flower in the program. It's very limited. It's very confusing. There's only 2 established operators. There's 3 license holders for the program, but there's only 2 established operators who are really serving patients all across the state. So it's got a lot of challenges that you're not going to find in a lot of other states. However, in 2019, when the hemp laws passed, then you started seeing novel hemp cannabinoid making its way into the market, and with unimaginably almost no regulation here in the state of the $150 for a hemp license to buy or to manufacture, grow, sell, is pretty low cost to get into the hemp program in Texas. And so because of that, you've seen the hemp program skyrocket in Texas. And I think we had like 1,500 people back in 2019 that were licensed, and now it's like 9,000 people, 9,000 business entities that are either, from seed to sale, growing it to, consumer transaction. So we're doing billions and billions of dollars in novel hemp cannabinoid in the state of Texas. Now, so those 2, to give you that dynamic, those 2 programs, if you will, are giving patients or people access to the cannabis plant in 2 different kinds of way, and in a weird way are almost competing against one another, but not really, but they are. And one is just simply doing the other one out by light years. Sure. Right. So that has become an issue. Sure. As you could imagine. There are actually people still getting arrested for what is considered legal hemp compliant product here.
Is that just at the discretion of what the police are? Okay.
Absolutely. So there was not a lot of, or any really, money spent to Department of State Health Services or Department of Ag to really regulate this program. It's a very bare bones program. So that's why there's a bunch of bad actors out here, because it's so easy to get into the market, and there's nobody checking you on if you're even. They're not checking your COAs. They're not checking if you even have a hemp license to sell the product. No. So it is what it is. But we're in this weird position where, yes, now we have federal rescheduling, right? So we do have these laws that would match federal CSA when that time comes. I know we still have a minimum at least 2 months before this law change can even happen. I'm actually anticipating it coming out a little bit longer than that. But Texas certainly will be able to make that happen, unless somebody at DSHS or one of the executives intervene. So it could. Okay. It could. But really, the thing that's most prominent right now is in 2 weeks we have a interim Senate hearing that was given by our Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He's the president of the Senate. That wanted the State Affairs Committee to evaluate whether to ban D8, D9 hemp cannabinoids, or how to more tightly regulate that. The interim itself is very jaw dropping because in bold letter it says ban D8, D9. So everybody, whoa, don't ban it.
Yeah.
But then when you read the subcaption, it talks about what they're looking for in that specific hearing, which is common sense regulations like age verification. I mean, because we have guys out here because nobody's doing any, nobody, there's not unregulated. People are selling to minors. And when I say
Oh,
minors, like 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, you know what I'm saying?
oof.
Like 125 milligram gummies and like vape pens, THCP vape pens and things like that, right? We can see how that could be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
right.
would think so. That's crazy.
That's one of the big ones is age verification and then going after bad characters in the space. How can they refine the rules to make sure that people are not, you know, giving, kids or people who don't need the access. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. We're not quite certain. Historically, the lieutenant governor hates this issue and has been really the biggest roadblock in any kind of reform that we've gotten.
True, but I feel like you can't not do something if you have. So I feel like that's the thing a little bit with the Delta 8 conversation in general and across a lot of states. I think it does light a fire sometimes under politicians to put something in place that does work because you can have 13-year-olds just taking cannabis and having access effectively to Delta 8 and stuff like that, right? Don't you think that would
Yeah.
have to? So is it not a good thing, but is it helpful at least in that way in terms of
Well,
putting pressure on?
certainly, I think that if the intent is to evaluate how to improve what we have now, absolutely, it's 100% warranted and welcomed.
Yeah.
But this lieutenant governor has historically, and I'm not saying that I don't because I don't really know what the intent is, but historically has looked to go after it and shut it all down. And when I say shut it all down, we're talking about even non psychoactive, cannabinoids like CBG and CBD and like just going after all of it. Let's shut it all down. And so that is where there's concern that this could be, hey, we could have this hearing and talk about all of these things. And then when we get to the legislature, the lieutenant governor is like, oh, this is all really bad. We're going to ban it all. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where the concern is. But there's a lot of wonderful organizations here in Texas that are fighting on the hemp cannabinoid side, specifically for hemp cannabinoid, as well as the greater sphere of hemp and in its place in agriculture. So we already have the biggest hemp processing facility in North America here in Texas. So it's, it's not going away. The issue is not going away. It's going to only get further magnified, I think, when it comes to what we previously talked about, Schedule 3 transitioning, as well as what's going to happen with the new farm bill that comes out. How is that going to impact what is allowed under USDA, and how is that going to impact what this already mini issue we're dealing with just at the state level? So there's a lot of moving parts right now.
A lot of work to be done on your end, which is great. And I'm glad that you guys are, really taking the time and effort to push for that. Cause I think people definitely need it. People in Texas definitely need it. We've heard on the Alpha Nooner a ton for people who are in Texas and are a little frustrated that they can't have normal access. Our, Dan Aarons is in Texas as well and also can't get access to it, which is unfortunate.
I
Bummer.
hope I
Okay.
answered your question though.
Yes. Yes. Good. It's all good. Go. Oh, wait. Sorry. I thought you said, let me answer your question. Sorry. I misheard. Okay. Well, then I feel like so a lot coming up. You guys are doing a lot of the work. What are you most excited for in the next, let's say, 1, 2, 3 years to see on the Texas cannabis front?
Oh, wow. Excited about, I'm a pretty optimistic guy. So, I've been saying for years, we're going to decriminalize. So I would really love to see the first, we haven't had penalty reduction in the state of Texas since this year will be 50 years, 1975. The current rules that we have, which are possession under 2 ounces, Class B misdemeanor, between 2 and 4 ounces, which is a quarter pound, is Class A misdemeanor. Anything above that, we start kicking in felonies. Any amount of concentrate, any amount, I'm talking just, is an automatic felony in the state of Texas. Automatic felony for any amount. And when they go to, so if you have, like, let's just say you have, some brownies that are five milligrams each, they're not going to weigh and consider just those 5 milligrams within each brownie. They're just going to weigh the whole bag. You're going to fail. That's your weight that you're going to face on for felony weight. So there are people that are still getting rocked with some hardcore felonies out here for going to New Mexico or going to Colorado. I had guys bragging to me the other day. They were coming back from Missouri. What?
Yeah.
So it's I'm really hoping. We've gotten really, really close, especially on the concentrate side. We had a bill that actually got passed by both the House and Senate. Unfortunately, it didn't make its way through because the lieutenant governor tried to add banning D8 language onto it right when it got passed. So it got shut down, in the interim between House and Senate, and died. But we know that that's something that can be done. So we're hoping for that. And we're also just hoping for general, the governor himself has come out and said he doesn't want to see people going to jail for weed, straight up. So his proposal in the past has been he wants to see it move from a B to a C. So we say B to C language. So it becomes a Class C misdemeanor, which typically you're not getting arrested for. A Class C, you might get a small citation, something like that. So we're really hoping that maybe something like some kind of penalty reduction will happen. And that, I think that would be really special in this next legislative session. It's something I think that's tangible, but definitely in 3 years tangible after another election. But I also am excited to see what happens with medical. If we do, again, it all kind of comes down to what Schedule 3 looks like. I don't think anybody has any real idea what Schedule 3 is going to look like, what that's going to mean for rec, what that's going to mean for actual established medical markets across the country. I think there's some legislation that needs to be passed by Congress to really protect, those industries. But I'm excited because I really feel like if we just kind of move along this trajectory that we're in, there's just so much economic growth. There's, so many millions of people that are getting access, that you're just starting to see quality of life. I think that that there's opportunity to really morph this beyond cannabis and introduce other psychedelics like, other natural plant medicines, ayahuasca, psilocybin, those kinds of things. So cannabis really is the beginning of the end of the war on drugs, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's taken so long. And so I'm very confident that it's just when, not if. And it's happening right before. We're actually living in those times. We're that generation that is doing that. So I'm excited. Yeah, this year, next year, there's a lot of work to do. But in Texas, in Texas, it gets really hot out here. And it's hard to get anything done in this state without like backbreaking work, and hot heat. Things take a long time. So we're used to that.
You're not scared of breaking a sweat in terms of getting work done. You're going to do it and get it through.
Everything is far away from everything. So we're used to going the miles to do things. So, nothing here is going to change. In fact, we're only getting more people active on the nonprofit side. We're just one nonprofit, but now you're starting to see some other guys start to come into play, and guys who actually have some like real serious money that can do some stuff. So it's really exciting just to kind of be a part of it, not only as an activist, but also as an observer and a general consumer. So there's a lot that's going to change here in the next year and a half.
I think it's exciting to be in the change, but like you're saying, I think there is a road ahead and you got to put in the work to get that done, which is fantastic. Would love to know for you guys, at the Texas Cannabis Collective, how do people get involved, follow what you're doing, support what you're doing? If you're in Texas, not in Texas, any difference there? Can you kind of help us through with that?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for us is, follow us on our social media accounts. That's the biggest way you can support us, is by, not everybody can give money or time, but even just social media presence really elevates us through the algorithm, lets a lot of people see the work that we're doing. First and foremost, follow us. I think we're at TX Canico on Twitter. I'm sorry, X. And we're at TX Cannabis Collective on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. I think we're on LinkedIn, YouTube. We got a bunch of them, but we're the most active, I think, on Twitter and Instagram, simply because the algorithms there are a little bit more friendly to us than the other places. But we're also we're txcanico.com. You can go to our website. We're in the middle of revamping it, but we've got it more towards the nonprofit look. And so really just supporting us by following along. And then, we do have a donation page through like a Venmo account. So, but we're typically not super money driven. We do have funds. We do get some small time donations, but a lot of the work that we do because we have a lot of influence and we have a very strong network of people that we can call on to team up with and collaborate with and do projects with. So just please follow us and share our content.
There you go. That sounds good. A follow is free, so easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take the time to do that, especially because Texas needs it. I feel like, again, it's one of those states where it's a beautiful state, full of a ton of great people, and they need some better access. So I'm glad you're working to do that. So really appreciate it. All right. Well, then I'll let you enjoy the rest of your weekend, Austin, but really appreciate you taking the time to kind of sit down and chat through it. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much. All righty. Welcome back. Hope you guys enjoyed our little interview with Austin. I think it's fantastic. He's always, he's great to have on. I've talked to him a bit on X and or Twitter, and so friendly, so knowledgeable about the space and Texas as a whole, which is great. I feel like with any of these states, I feel like we've turned a corner. Feels like cannabis is here. We need to figure out how to make it safe for people and keep people out of jail to access. I've seen some of the comments, which are great. So thanks for the questions and comments. Yes, go Texas, go cannabis. I do know there are some politicians out there who are still negative on cannabis. Seems like a lot of the times it's only certain aspects of cannabis that they don't like, whether that's public consumption or, I've heard with Ted Cruz, his criticisms around driving under the influence, which is also an issue with alcohol. So even though he's very pro-alcohol, so I feel like it's one of those things where politicians are going to make a lot of noise, especially if their, constituents are kind of anti-cannabis, if they still remain anti-cannabis, or if they have some interests backing them that are more alcohol related potentially. But ultimately, I think they're going to make a lot of noise, but then it's something that they need to eventually turn the corner on and also work with. I think it'll also majorly depend on how things go post-election. I know we'll hopefully get Schedule 3 in this year, hoping on that. But what happens beyond it, I feel like we've talked about the different candidates and the different options and how it relates to cannabis. I don't think that there's one out there currently that is like a staunch abolitionist for cannabis and just, even though Trump, I guess, is a teetotaler in a lot of ways, I think he's very sort of states' rights focused. So I think ultimately politicians are going to have to eventually kind of adapt and adjust because it's already here in a lot of ways. And even in Texas, like we were talking about on the show with Austin earlier, it's here in a lot of different ways. People are going to access it in neighboring states where it's available. So it's time to kind of put in the guardrails and, the safety precautions and allowing sort of regulated access, I think, ultimately for both the people there and everyone else. Looking through, yes, Baz, that is true. I was looking at this briefly, Baz. I would have to look at it in more detail, but it does seem like they have a pretty common sense approach for cannabis where you're not able to give it to minors, you're not able to purchase it as a minor. I think they have some public consumption, laws, which again, like you can't smoke cigarettes or vape on an airplane or things like that. So I feel like general decorum, that probably holds true. Also, yes, Stevie, we are definitely still focused on Schedule 3. It's so funny. We got the announcements for Schedule 3, and I feel like everyone's on to the next thing, what comes next, which I totally understand. But excited for Schedule 3 to actually land and be here. And yeah, good reminder. You got to go out and find the politicians that reflect your interests and try to get them to hold themselves to their promises and hold them accountable ultimately. So thanks for some of the questions and comments in there. I feel like those are kind of fun to look over. But hope you guys appreciate it. Hope to talk to Austin again soon. It's great having him on. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we've got Todd Harrison back in the mix, ready to talk about sort of the whole industry as a whole. And so stay tuned. Bring questions if you have them, and we will talk then. Thanks so much, everyone.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.